Before he was arrested in that yellow raincoat that would make him infamous, before police led him through the mountains to dig up the remains of his victims, Yoo Young-Chul made a chilling confession. He told investigators that he had planned to kill 100 people. By the time they caught him in July 2004, he'd murdered at least 19 people, targeting people he felt he was wronged by, the rich and women, and he was disappointed he'd been stopped. This is the story of South Korea's Raincoat Killer. On April 18, 1970, Yoo Young-Chul was born in Gochang County, a rural area in North Jeolla Province, South Korea. His home life was marked with violence from the start, as Yoo was a child that his parents never wanted. In fact, he was considered a burden, so much so that when Yoo was just a baby, his mother attempted to unsuccessfully kill him. This family instability caused his parents to separate shortly after birth, and for several years, Yoo and his siblings were raised by their grandmother, who was extremely poor. Life wasn't easy. In the 1990s and early 2000s, South Korea was going through a time of dramatic economic and social change. The 1997 Asian financial crisis hit South Korea hard, leading to mass layoffs, rising unemployment, and increasing income inequality. The poverty rate nearly doubled from 7.6% in 1997 to 14.28% in 1998. Many people at the bottom of the middle class were pushed into poverty. The family eventually moved to Seoul, settling in the Mapo district with their father and his mistress, who he eventually married. But they still lived in poverty. His parents were blue-collar workers who struggled to make ends meet, especially because his father was chronically ill and unable to keep up with the physical demands of his construction job. They lived near affluent families, and the contrast was impossible to ignore. During his childhood at school, he was bullied relentlessly for being poor. His classmates were from wealthy families, whereas Yoo's family could barely afford to buy him clean clothes. These experiences planted seeds of resentment that would fester over time, transforming it into a deep-seated hostility against the rich. In science class, Yoo showed an unnatural fascination with dissection. He would catch frogs and twist their necks, or methodically open their bellies as if performing surgery. He caught rats with bare hands, fearless where other children trembled. On one occasion, his elementary school teacher once praised his aptitude for science, suggesting he might become a doctor. Yoo couldn't wait to tell his stepmother, but when he got home and told her what his teacher said, his stepmother scoffed back at him and said, "We can't even afford rice, and you want to be a doctor." After his father died in 1984, Yoo moved back with his biological mother, the same person who wanted to kill him when he was a baby. Initially, he flourished. He joined sports teams, became extremely talented in painting and singing, made lots of friends, and also had several girlfriends. But despite all this, beneath this cheery facade, a dark pattern emerged. As a hall monitor, he often abused students physically and verbally. He even started to physically assault his teachers and started to steal, and often spoke about a desire to control all the women and girls he knew, believing he was entitled to them. He eventually ended up spending some time in juvenile detention for some petty crimes. In his senior school years, Yoo was denied admission to his chosen art school, reportedly because he was colorblind. Instead, he enrolled in a technical school that he did not want to go to. It was around this time that his life began to spiral. Throughout the 1990s, he cycled in and out of prison, convicted of theft in 1988, again in 1991, burglary in 1993, and robbery, forgery, and identity theft in 1998. He married a massage parlor worker in 1993, and they had a son together in 1994, but the marriage was strained by his constant criminal activity. Then, things took a much darker turn in the year 2000. Yoo was convicted of raping a 15-year-old girl and was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. While he served his time, his wife divorced him. It was behind bars that Yoo's murderous fantasies began to solidify. He read articles about another Korean serial killer who had just been convicted as Yoo was spending his time in prison, Jong Do-young. Jong had targeted wealthy people across the country to buy a nice apartment and car for him and his girlfriend. Reading about Jong's crimes while in prison gave Yoo a sense that what he was fantasizing about was possible and had been done before. But here's where the inspiration for this violence starts and ends. Zhang was killing to rob people of their wealth and make himself rich, whereas Yoo had developed an ideological hatred towards the rich, and also later, women. Yoo was released from prison on September the 11th, 2003. He was 33 years old, unemployed, and consumed by hatred. It's reported that during this time, Yoo was religiously watching crime films to amp himself up for what he was about to do next. One of them being a Korean film called Public Enemy, where the main character targets elderly wealthy people. Another one is a popular crime film, Usual Suspects, starring Kevin Spacey. Whether or not these were part of his inspirations is not known, but just 13 days later, Yoo would commit his first murder. On September the 24th, 2003, Yoo broke into a house in Seoul's upscale Sinsadong neighborhood. Inside lived Lee Deok-soo, a 72-year-old professor at Sukmyong University, and his 68-year-old wife, Lee Yeon-ok. Before they could react, Yoo attacked them with a hammer, striking them repeatedly until they were dead. He then tried to make the scene look like a robbery gone wrong, ransacking the house. But here's what confused investigators. He didn't take anything. No money, no valuables, nothing. This was just the beginning, though. On October the 9th, 2003, Yoo broke into another wealthy home in the Gugi area of Jongno district. He murdered an 85-year-old grandmother with his hammer. When her daughter-in-law heard the noise and came to investigate, Yoo killed her too. Then he went upstairs and found the family's son, who was disabled and unable to defend himself. With the same cold brutality, Yoo bludgeoned him to death. A forensic officer later told the press that the son had been beaten with such violence that parts of his brain were spread on the ground. Between September and November 2003, Yoo killed at least 7 people in their homes, all elderly, all from wealthy neighborhoods. He would break in, usually through a half-open window or by posing as a repairman. He studied their routines for days, learning when and where they took walks, when deliveries arrived, and how often they had visitors, how long they would stay. Then, when the time was right, he struck with his hammer, a 4-kilogram weapon he had customized to fit his grip perfectly. And here's the interesting part. The hammer wasn't chosen randomly. To Yoo, as it does to some political ideologies, it represented the working class. In his twisted logic, using it to kill the wealthy was poetic, a symbol of the downtrodden rising up against their ruling class oppressors. These weren't crimes of passion or impulse. They were calculated acts of revenge against a class of society he felt had wronged him. All of this done wearing a signature yellow raincoat and a baseball cap to keep his identity concealed. Seoul police were baffled. The crime scenes looked like robbery homicides, but nothing was ever stolen. They were initially hesitant to connect the killings, but they also didn't have the logistics to. The police at the time operated as independent silos and were not linked to each other. So if a crime happened in one region, this information wouldn't be shared with police in another region. But then, they found matching footprints at multiple scenes. It was then undeniable. In order to prevent any more killings, they had to come clean and say Seoul had a serial killer roaming its streets. The media got wind of the story. Panic spread through Seoul's wealthy neighborhoods. People installed extra locks, hired security guards, stopped answering their doors to strangers. The pressure on police to catch the killer intensified. But little did that help, as Yoo was already changing his tactics. His fight wasn't just against the wealthy. He also had a strong hate for women he considered promiscuous. By late 2003, as the investigation into the wealthy victims intensified, Yoo decided to shift his focus. After his wife divorced him while he was in prison for rape, and after a girlfriend broke up with him when she discovered his criminal past, Yoo developed a burning hatred for women, particularly women who reminded him of his ex-wife. His wife had worked in a massage parlor. His girlfriend had worked in a telephone room. These are establishments found in some East Asian countries that often function as fronts for prostitution. So Yoo targeted women in similar professions. Women shouldn't be sluts is a mantra he had decided to codify into his twisted ideology. In January 2004, Yoo was briefly arrested on a minor theft charge, but was released after just 2 days. By March 2004, he had developed a new system. He would call escort services from Seoul's red light districts, requesting that women come to his office till, a small studio apartment in Mapo district. When the women arrived, Yoo would show them a fake police badge he'd purchased at a bootleg market, along with handcuffs. Pretending to be a police officer, he would tell them they were under arrest and force them into his apartment. Once inside, he would make them take a shower in his bathroom. Then, as they stood vulnerable and unsuspecting, he would bludgeon them unconscious with his hammer. But Yoo didn't stop there. What happened next was even more horrific. In his bathroom, Yoo would kill the women and then systematically dismember their bodies, cutting them into 16 to 18 pieces. He removed their fingertips to prevent identification. He would then hang the severed heads from his toilet paper holder to drain the blood. To mask the sound of his butchery, he would turn on the water and play Vangelis's Conquest of Paradise at high volume. Although this was never proven, it's also alleged that Yoo sometimes ate parts of his victims, particularly their livers. He believed consuming their organs would cleanse his spirit and give him strength. After dismembering the bodies, Yoo would stuff the remains into black garbage bags. Then he would take a taxi to the mountains near Bongwon Temple in Seoul district. When taxi drivers commented on the strong smell coming from his bags, Yoo would laugh it off, saying things like it was old kimchi that had been fermenting. The area near Bongwon Temple was perfect for his purposes. The temple, founded in 889 AD and nestled in a wooded valley of the An Mountain, was surrounded by thick forests with hiking trails. The summer heat of 2004 was particularly intense. Temperatures hovered around 95 degrees Fahrenheit, that's about 34 degrees Celsius, with tropical nights where it never dropped below 77 degrees, that's about 25 degrees Celsius. In such conditions, human bodies decay rapidly, making them harder to identify. Between March and July 2004, Yoo murdered at least 11 women this way. Most were in their 20s and 30s, massage therapists, telephone room workers, and escorts trying to make a living. One of his victims was strangled rather than bludgeoned, a 23-year-old telephone room attendant he killed on March the 16th. Her body was secretly buried in the mountain behind Sogang University. The women's disappearances went largely unnoticed by authorities. In South Korea at that time, sex work was illegal and heavily stigmatized. Women who disappeared from these industries weren't considered high-priority cases. Their families often didn't know what they did for work, and the establishments they worked for were reluctant to involve police. It was a perfect opportunity for someone like Yoo, and he exploited this invisibility, this social blind spot, to continue killing undetected. But the people who worked in those industries noticed. The pimps and massage parlor owners saw the pattern that police were missing. The issue was that often sex workers are hardly believed in a lot of cases, and often arrested if they did get involved with the police. By summer 2004, multiple women had vanished after being called to the same phone number. Brothel owners, pimps, and madams, desperate to protect their workers, started voluntarily collaborating with police in ways they never had before. They reported the suspicious phone number that kept coming up. Eventually, police decided to set a trap. They knew Yoo would eventually try to arrange for another victim, and that's exactly what he did. When Yoo called for another escort on July the 13th, 2004, they were ready. His final victim was going to be a woman called Myuu, but this time, when Yoo showed up at the meeting location, the massage parlor staff confronted him, and police moved in. When Yoo was arrested, officers found him chewing phone cards, presumably trying to destroy evidence. He was carrying his fake police badge and wearing a signature yellow raincoat. But even in custody, Yoo wasn't done playing games. During his initial interrogation, Yoo faked having a seizure, the same tactic he'd used to escape arrest back in 2000. This time, when officers removed his handcuffs to help him, he bolted. For 12 hours, he was on the run again, and Seoul police faced the humiliation of having let the city's most wanted killer slip through their fingers. Fortunately, a patrol officer recognized and recaptured him before he could kill again. Once back in custody, Yoo began to confess, and what he told investigators was even more horrifying than they'd imagined. In the interrogation room, Yoo spoke calmly and without emotion. He confessed to 20 murders, though investigators could ultimately only verify 19 with physical evidence. One case was dismissed when it turned out to have been committed by another serial killer, Jeong Nam-kyu. His confessions were chilling in their detail. He described how he selected his victims, how he gained access to their homes or lured women to his apartment, and how he killed them. He explained that elderly couples were, quote, parasites, who had benefited from a system that excluded people like him. He said women in sex work were dirty and deserved to die. These weren't the ramblings of someone in psychosis. His thoughts were coherent, cold, and rational, at least within the confines of his own twisted worldview. When asked about his motives in front of a TV camera, Yoo said, "Women shouldn't be sluts, and the rich should know what they've done." But here's what made the case even more disturbing to investigators. Yoo admitted he had been practicing. Before committing his first murder, he bought weapons and spent time torturing and killing stray dogs to perfect his technique. He wanted to ensure he could execute his plan efficiently. To Yoo, murder was a skill to be honed, a craft to be perfected. He also revealed he hadn't limited himself to just the wealthy and sex workers. He'd killed others too, including at least one street vendor who recognized that Yoo's police ID was fake and called him out on it. That act of defiance cost the man his life. Yoo murdered him and burned his body in an oil tank on Walmido Island. The man's death had a tragic ripple effect. 7 months later, his second brother took his own life from the shock. His brother's girlfriend killed herself shortly afterwards. 8 months after that, the youngest brother also took his own life. Only the third brother survived, barely clinging to life with psychiatric treatment. Yoo told investigators he had planned to kill 100 people, and ultimately, he was disappointed to have been stopped at 20. The investigation into Yoo Young-Chul's crimes was hampered by systemic issues within South Korean law enforcement. At the time, police departments were largely siloed by district, with minimal communication between regions. Officers were incentivized to only publicize crimes after they'd been solved to improve their chances of promotion. This meant that patterns spanning multiple districts, like Yoo's murder spree, were much harder to detect. There was also a lack of centralized forensic resources. When the bodies near Bangwon Temple were finally discovered, forensic officer Kim Hee-suk and her team faced the gruesome task of excavating and identifying remains that had been exposed to a summer of extreme heat. The humidity and temperature had accelerated decomposition, making identification challenging. Many victims could only be identified through dental records and the few body parts that remained intact. The key forensic evidence that ultimately sealed Yoo's fate was DNA found from multiple victims on his customized hammer, the 4-kilogram weapon he'd used to bludgeon his victims. Investigators also matched footprints found at the crime scenes of the wealthy victims to Yoo's shoes. And of course, there were his detailed confessions, which he gave freely and seemed almost proud to share. One profiler who worked the case, Kim Il-young, assessed Yoo's psychological state. Yoo wasn't insane in any legal sense. Court-appointed psychiatrists found him completely sane, capable of distinguishing right from wrong, and fully aware of the consequences of his actions. He had planned his crimes in detail, evaded capture for nearly a year, and expressed satisfaction at having committed them. Instead, Yoo was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. He exhibited classic traits: lack of empathy, lack of remorse, superficial charm when it suited him, and a complete inability to form genuine emotional connections with others. He created his own belief system based on distrust of societal and moral standards. To Yoo, his actions made perfect sense. He saw himself as an agent of revenge, punishing those he believed deserved it. South Korea had seen serial killers before, but Yoo Young-Chul was different. He became the first person in the country to be publicly identified as a psychopath. His case introduced the Korean public to concepts like psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder in ways it never encountered before. Yoo's trial began on September 6, 2004 at the Seoul Central District Court. He was charged with 20 counts of murder and numerous other offenses, including sexual assault, desecration of corpses, and obstruction of justice. From the start, Yoo was disruptive and eventually violent. 2 weeks into the trial, on September the 21st, he became angry at a bench order to appear at the next hearing. He jumped over the defendant's seat and lunged at 3 judges, trying to attack them. He had to be physically restrained. On October the 4th, he was supposed to appear in court again, but he had attempted to take his own life prior to the hearing. His legal team attempted an insanity plea, but court-appointed psychiatrists disagreed. They found Yoo to be sane and fully responsible for his actions. Prosecutors called for the death penalty, citing the overwhelming evidence, the brutality of his crimes, and his complete lack of remorse. When asked if he had anything to say during sentencing, Yoo told the judge, "Thank you for asking for the death penalty. That's what I want." On December the 13th, 2004, the Seoul Central District Court convicted Yoo Young-Chul of 20 murders and sentenced him to death. The judge described the murders as inhumane and unprecedented, calling Yoo a danger to all of society. The sentence was upheld by the Supreme Court in June 2005. Yoo Young-Chul's case sent shockwaves down South Korean society. It wasn't just a body count. The 20 confirmed murders made him the deadliest serial killer in the country's modern history. It was what his crimes revealed about the gaps in society, the people who fell through the cracks, and the systems that failed to protect the most vulnerable. The case sparked widespread debate about capital punishment. South Korea officially retains the death penalty, but there's been a moratorium on executions since December the 30th, 1997. No one has been put to death in over 25 years. Before Yoo's arrest, there was growing momentum towards abolishing capital punishment entirely, but his crimes reignited support for the death penalty. So Yoo sits on death row, one of 59 inmates awaiting executions that will likely never come. Following his sentencing, he was transferred to Seoul Detention Center. In September 2023, he and other death row inmates were relocated to Seoul Correction Center, which is equipped with an execution chamber. What's life like for Yoo in prison? Well, according to reports from corrections officers, he's never expressed remorse. He reportedly lives above the law within the prison system, demanding special privileges and threatening guards. One prison official said Yoo once broke a guard's arm. He demands the best and biggest portions of food and makes late-night demands for various snacks that guards feel compelled to fulfill out of fear. Former corrections officers have described his cell as so frightening that staff are reluctant to enter it. In 2024, a former corrections officer named Lee Yoon-Hui revealed something chilling. Yoo claims to be haunted by the ghosts of his victims. He told Lee that he sees 3 to 4 ghosts near the bathroom in his solitary confinement room, just below the ceiling, and that they appear every night. He said he can't sleep and is exhausted from the constant hauntings. Whether this is genuine torment or just another calculated performance from a man who's been manipulating people his entire life remains unclear. This was all happening during a period when South Korea's class divide became more pronounced. The wealthy neighborhoods where Yoo committed his first murders, places like Sinsadong, Gangnam, and Samcheong, represented everything he felt he'd been denied. These were areas where professors, business owners, and other affluent people lived in standalone houses, a symbol of success in Korean society. Meanwhile, sex work remained deeply stigmatized but widespread, existing in a legal gray zone that left women vulnerable. The women Yoo murdered were doing survival work in an industry that offered no legal protections and no recourse when they were victimized. Police didn't prioritize their disappearances. Society didn't mourn them the way they mourned the elderly professors. It took brothel owners and pimps, people operating outside the law themselves, to finally bring the pattern to police attention. Yoo's case also exposed serious flaws in South Korean law enforcement, the siloed nature of police departments, the lack of communication between districts, the incentive structures that discourage transparency. All of these factors allowed Yoo to operate for nearly a year. The case led to significant reforms, including the introduction of criminal profiling to Korean policing. The story of Yoo Young-Chul is a story about anger, about resentment, about a society fractured by class and inequality. It's about the people who became invisible, the poor, the elderly living alone, the women working in the shadows of the sex industry, and what happens when someone decides to exploit that invisibility for murder. But it's also a story about a killer who was, in the end, utterly ordinary in some ways and extraordinarily evil in others. Yoo wasn't a criminal mastermind. He made mistakes. He got arrested for petty crimes even during his murder spree. What allowed him to kill 20 people wasn't genius. It was a system that failed to connect the dots, a society that didn't notice when certain people disappeared, and a profound lack of empathy that let him see his victims not as human, but as symbols of everything he hated. Today, Yoo Young-Chul remains on death row in Seoul, where he will likely spend the rest of his life. South Korea shows no signs of resuming executions, despite periodic debates about reinstating them, so Yoo exists in a strange limbo, sentenced to death but living indefinitely, haunted by ghosts, real or imagined. A man whose name has become synonymous with evil in Korean society. Thank you as always for listening. If you enjoy my content, then please ensure you subscribe and comment on this video. You can also click like on this video, as it helps it out on the algorithm. And if you want to support some more, you can find the links in the description of this video to buy me a coffee and coffee.